could have legitimate concerns about their safety when we open our doors. And we want to open our doors to people who are willing to go through proper screening measures and who want to be here and want to be productive members of our society. I'll leave it at that. I know that. That's why I said we take issue with the government of Iran, not the people of Iran, certainly.
But the
Could
people
have
are the ones
legitimate
that are
Look, I know you guys
banned.
want to push me to say something
To defend
about
the
we open our
policy.
doors.
That's it. I'm not
And
trying
we
to-
want to
it's
open
not a
our
gotcha.
doors. Okay, anything else to on the people executive order?
No.
Okay.
Okay, China and North Korea.
Okay.
Okay, today Secretary of the Treasury talking about sanctions on China, and this regarding this, will the United States ask to South Korea for support these sanctions? Did you U.S. ask to Moon Jae-in tomorrow summit? Will the U.S. ask for?
Will we ask for South Korean support on sanctions
Yes.
against North Korea? I know that we have asked a lot of countries to do more. A lot of countries have influence, a great deal of influence, especially their neighbors, with the DPRK. So we continue to ask nations to do more to try to ratchet up the pressure on the DPRK. You referenced the sanctions that were announced at 2 o'clock today by the Treasury Secretary in taking a look at some Chinese entities. We believe that those entities have a role in getting money to the North Koreans, and that money doesn't go into the pockets of normal, regular North Korean citizens. That money goes into the pocket, we believe, of their illegal ballistic weapons programs and also its illegal nuclear weapons program. So that, or nuclear program. So that is a big concern of ours, and that is one of the reasons that the Treasury Department chose to sanction those Chinese entities. And that is something that we have continuously, especially with regard to the Chinese, to put the pressure on them to do that. Secretary Tillerson has talked about that, where the Chinese have done a notable job, but he's characterized it as uneven, so we'd like to see them do more. Anything else on DPRK? Hi.
So, this announcement, are you sending the message to China that U.S. will move forward on North Korea issues without Chinese cooperation?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So, are you sending a message to China that United States will work on North Korea issues without Chinese cooperation?
Well, I didn't say that the Chinese weren't cooperating. I said that it's been uneven. We'd like to see them do more. And they know that. We've had conversations about that in the past at the highest levels. And so we'd just like to continue to call upon them to do more.
So
Okay.
even with
Anything
this
else?
action-
DPRK? DPRK?
China?
Okay. Okay. Go right ahead. Hi, how are you?
Thank you. So I wanted to ask about Liu Xiaobao, the human rights activist. And Ambassador Branstad said that he would like to help Mr. Liu to get cancer treatment overseas. And we are wondering whether the United States supports that. Are you talking to the Beijing government about it?
So one of the things we've done is, as I've said in other instances, that we have conversations at the highest levels of government with government officials on areas where we have a great deal of concern. Among those would be human rights issues. This one for Liu Xiaobao, who's a Nobel Peace Prize laureate and a writer as well. He unfortunately is battling cancer at this time. We would like to see him get additional information about how he is doing. He's not a U.S. citizen. He's a Chinese national. But we'd like him to have access to international medical specialists if he chooses to do so. One of the important things we see is, give him the opportunity, if he wants to seek medical treatment elsewhere, to be able to seek medical treatment elsewhere. You referenced something that Ambassador Branstad said, and along with that, he said our heart goes out to him and to his wife, and we'd like to see him have the opportunity for treatment elsewhere, if that would be of assistance to him.
This is related,
Yeah.
but it'll be extremely brief. You guys today notified Congress of a rather large arms sale to Taiwan.
To Taiwan, yep.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep. So let me just get all the details here because I want to get everything straight. But we, normally we wouldn't talk about this until it is submitted to Congress, and Congress was notified today about that. Give me just a moment, please.
Go ahead.
Is it book getting bigger?
Kind of like a messy former journalist, you know, you keep a lot of papers around. So the administration had formally notified Congress of 7 proposed defense sales for Taiwan. It's now valued about $1.42 billion. The notifications are consistent with the Taiwan Relations Act. It shows, we believe, our support for Taiwan's ability to maintain a sufficient self-defense capability. There's no change, I should point out, to our longstanding One China policy, which is based, as you all know, on 3 joint communiques on the Taiwan Relations Act. There's continuity here. The United States has been doing defense sales with Taiwan for 50 years or so nothing has changed. Anything else on the Asian region that anyone wants to talk about?
Yes.
Fine.
So you said that we'd like to, the State Department of the United States would like to see China do more.
Mm-hmm.
Are they even doing what they said they would do regarding? They said that they were going to limit the coal I guess buys from North Korea and fuel shipments to North Korea. Has that even happened?
So some of this is classified, so some of that I cannot talk about. I do have a list of something that is public. I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but some of the things that we have been asking other nations, including China, to do, and some of the ways that we have seen those countries take steps in the right direction. I've talked a little bit here about guest worker programs and how there are North Korean guest workers in many countries around the world. We have asked many of those other countries to limit the number of North Korean workers that can work in their countries. The reason why, we see the money not going into their pockets, but it goes, the government confiscates it, and it goes into the pockets of the government of the DPRK. And we believe that that money is then being used to fund its illegal weapons program and also its nuclear program. So we continue to talk to all of these nations about sort of putting the squeeze, if you will, on North Korea, and that would be one example of it. Okay, anything else on Asia? Okay, go ahead.
I wondered if you had a readout for the Secretary's meeting yesterday with the Korean Foreign Minister?
I don't have an actual readout for you on that meeting. I was in that meeting, and I would just describe it as it was a pleasant meeting. We had a lot of areas of agreement. I know that the President and the Secretary look forward to hosting President Moon here in Washington, certainly. Among the things that they talked about was the threat from North Korea and the alliance that we have with South Korea and the importance of that.
North Korean human rights issue being discussed at the meeting yesterday, Kang and Secretary.
I'm not, beyond what I just told you about that meeting, I'm not going to be able to get into any additional specifics. Okay, so let's move on from Asia. What do we have now? Okay, let's go to Syria then.
Okay,
sir, I'm sorry, tell me your name.
Oh, I'm Caleb with RT.
Oh, right, Caleb.
So, this recent statement from the White House alleging that the Syrian government was planning an upcoming chemical attack. Are you concerned that that could have created an opening for terrorist groups to carry out a chemical attack?
No.
You're not concerned, even though al-Nusra, al-Qaeda groups have been using chemical weapons in Syria? That's documented?
No. Next question on Syria.
Well, I mean, they could carry out a chemical attack, and then with the White House saying, oh, Assad was going to do it, that would create a cover for them to do such a thing.
Do I have to do this again? We know that Assad has used chemical weapons on his own people, and he's done that repeatedly.
Well, hasn't the United States convinced the world that
including
Saddam Hussein
women
had
and
weapons of mass
children,
destruction?
and we have all seen that. We have all seen the video, and there is no debate about that. Okay,
So
I'm
didn't
going to.
Assad give up his chemical weapons in 2013?
No.
Didn't that happen?
No,
That didn't happen,
Havy,
so the
Havy,
OPCW
let's
is
go
not
over to you.
being-
Thank you. So we know that ISIS is almost defeated in Mosul, maybe in a similar situation in Raqqa. We know that phase 2 is Deir ez-Zor. The Assad regime forces, along with the militias, Iranian proxies and militias in Syria, are trying to go to Deir ez-Zor and have backups, basically confronting the United States' efforts with their allies to defeat ISIS and Deir ez-Zor, maybe have some sort of partnership. Or trying to just impose themselves being there in a strong position. What do you expect, or what we're going to be seeing from the United States, confronting that Iranian militias, the Assad regime, the same way we saw in Tenf, which is in the in the southern eastern part of Syria.
So let me try to give folks an update on where things from our viewpoint. I'm not going to get into defense, DoD related issues, but in terms of Raqqa and what we can talk about. The first piece of news I have is that our Special Presidential Envoy Brett McGurk was in Syria. He was in Syria for the past couple days, I believe, and he talked with some of the local partners of the global campaign and the coalition to defeat ISIS. He and we're very proud to say that he was able to witness some of the humanitarian and stabilization work and assistance that's now underway in the liberated areas north of Raqqa. And if they think about this, in the past few weeks ago, we were on the outskirts. When I say we, I mean coalition partners, backed by the United States in an advise and assist capacity. We're outside of Raqqa, and now we're already getting into that portion where we can do some humanitarian and stabilization efforts. So we're proud of that. One of the things that Special Envoy McGurk has talked about is that once Raqqa is liberated, that we believe it's critical for local officials from the area to take over responsibility for post-liberation security, but most importantly, governance down the road. This campaign is trending in a positive direction. We are pleased with that, but it's certainly not over, and will take a lot of work in order to tie it up.
Are we going to see Assad regime forces go into Raqqa or try to govern and take these areas?
We would certainly hope not, and that is an area that is of great discussion because the United States wants to be able to stabilize these areas, eventually be able to bring the Syrian people, whether it's in Syria or whether it's in Mosul in Iraq. We want to be able to bring those folks back in their communities. That's where they want to live. Conditions are not ripe for that just yet. There is a lot of demining work that has to be done, electricity, water, all of those things. So folks are a long way off from seeing that just yet. And that's one of the reasons we talk about local control of those communities that is handled by a governance that is agreed to by the local people there. And so that will be one of the priorities that we would be working toward. Anything else on Syria? Yeah.
You said before, are you saying that Al-Qaeda has not used chemical weapons?
I'm not going to get into this conversation with you about this.
Because,
no. You want to have a debate, okay, about a hypothetical. Okay, and I'm not going to get into a debate.
If you announce that there's a pending chemical attack,
I'm not going to get into a debate about a hypothetical.
But if you announce that, then they could carry out an attack, and it would look like the government did it. I mean, isn't that a real possibility?
If you want to try to make excuses for the Assad regime, go right ahead. You've got a lot of cameras on you right now.
I'm talking about Al-Qaeda.
Okay, and I'm not going to spend all our folks' time having that conversation. We all know here in this room that Bashar al-Assad is responsible for chemical attacks on his own people, including women and children. We are not going to debate it beyond that. Al-Qaeda, horrible too, but what we're talking about right now is Assad and Syria.
Well, I asked you about Al-Qaeda.
Next
That's
question.
what I was asking for clarification.
Something else on Syria?
Russia?
Okay, let's go to Russia.
Okay.
All right.
One question on Syria, sorry.
So, sorry.
Okay, Michelle, just hold on one second.
Sure.
Okay, go right ahead.
So the Turkish forces have announced that they attacked U.S. partners, SDF, especially YPG in Syria, and they threatened they would do so in Afrin. Are you concerned about this new Turkish bombardment of your partners in Syria?
The reason that the United States is involved in Syria is to take out ISIS. That's why we care, and that's why we are there. Our focus is on liberating Raqqa right now. Our forces aren't operating in the area that you're talking about. I don't want to get into DoD territory. That is theirs, but our focus is on another part of Syria right now. Okay, Michelle, you had something on Russia. Let's just talk about it after, because we've got to wrap it up, and I know we have some other questions from other regions.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. With the meetings that are coming up now, does the Secretary of State...
You're referring to the G20?
With Russia. Does the Secretary of State expect and want the President to bring up continued Russian cyber meddling in the United States during this meeting? And will Tillerson bring that up with Lavrov?
I don't know. That's a good question, and that's a valid question that a lot of Americans will want to know the answer to. We've not had deep discussions about specifically what might happen in any given meeting. I know that General H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, announced that the president would be meeting with Vladimir Putin, thank you, at that meeting coming up, but I don't have any meetings or any schedules to go into.
Do you know if the
beyond that.
secretary would like him to bring up that issue?
I don't know. Okay. That I don't know. I haven't. We've been talking so much about other things lately that that one hasn't come up.
Heather,
Hey,
thank you.
how are you?
The secretary said earlier today he'd like to see staffing approval move at a faster rate at the White House.
Wait,
Actually, let me
Hold on.
finish my question, please.
Let her finish this one.
Thanks. The secretary said on camera today that he would like to see approvals of his staff positions go more quickly, frustrated that they haven't been at the White House. Has he received any assurance that they will?
Well, part of this is a bureaucratic process. And I know everyone would like to see this go faster, from the secretary down to, regular folks here at the State Department. That is something the secretary has as you heard, he spoke about earlier today. One of the issues is certainly the paperwork. And I know I went through some of that paperwork myself, including over at the Office of Government Ethics, and it takes time. It takes time to do that. It takes time to go through lots of resumes and people's applications and all of that. So I know that the secretary is very engaged in it. I know that the deputy secretary, John Sullivan, is very focused on this as well in trying to speed things along. And so we're optimistic that we'll be able to do that now that we have more people in place.
But without an assistant secretary of state for Asia, for Europe to handle these Russia issues, I mean, has that impacted diplomacy? The secretary made clear he knows who he wants.
I have seen some fantastic people here in this building who are what some would deride as holdovers. And they're terrific. I mean, they really are. They're committed to their jobs. They're professional every day. You all know a lot of them. They have just dove into the issues, stayed engaged in the issues. Even those who are retiring have stayed as engaged as I understand that they were, even a couple years ago. So I'm tremendously impressed with what a terrific job that they've doing, and frankly, hope some of them will stick around because they're a real attribute to this building and have worked hard on behalf of the secretary and the folks here at the State Department.
So you're saying no damage to diplomacy that you can detect?
Me personally, that I can detect, I think the secretary and his words speak for themselves, that he would like to see things moving along at a faster pace. Sure, we'd like to be able to fill those positions, and that is happening, and anticipate that it will happen at a faster pace. But the people who've been doing those jobs in the meantime have done a fantastic job, and I've had the good fortune of being able to work with a lot of them so far.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Henry Kissinger is meeting with Vladimir Putin today ahead of the upcoming U.S. meetings. He was in the Oval Office after Russia's top diplomats were meeting with the president. Is he playing any diplomatic role with this administration, either with the secretary or in some other role?
I don't have an answer to that. I believe they know one another, but I can try to look into that and see what I can get for you. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify if the Secretary and the Foreign Minister will have a full-scale meeting or just pull aside at the G20 point one and point two. Is there any movement over the Duchess issue?
Okay.
Because the Russians...
To your first point, and as you all know, the Secretary will be traveling over to the G20 summit. We had a meeting that had been scheduled with our Undersecretary, Tom Shannon, and that was canceled by the Russians. The topic that was on the agenda were some of those smaller issues, such as the dachas that I know are very important to the Russian government. That meeting was canceled. I know that we are certainly open to having that meeting rescheduled and would look forward to that to get some of these so-called irritants out of the way and deal with some of those things. In terms of any meetings at the G20 with regard to the Secretary's schedule, I just don't have any meetings or any information to give you on at this time. Okay? Last question.
The Secretary spent a lot of time on the GCC crisis this week. Did he make any progress?
Yeah, that was a big topic of conversation around here, certainly. I know that we continue to urge all of the parties to work together and resolve this issue. The United States continues to stand by and say, we will help you in a manner in which you need. The Kuwaitis have done a terrific job of taking the lead as mediators. As you know, the Kuwaitis were here earlier this week. The secretary met with them and talked with them about the importance. Everybody gets it. I think everybody gets it that this needs to be resolved. When it will be resolved, we're not certain of that at this time, but we're hoping that the parties will all agree to work together and recognize that there's going to be a negotiation that needs to be had.
Well, they're saying, especially the Saudis are saying no negotiations. So where's the process if no one's negotiating?
Yeah, I think I'd have to refer you to those governments to talk specifically about that, but the Kuwaitis remain what I would consider to be sort of the lead mediator, and we're standing by ready to help and advise if and when we can.
Just one question on Iraq.
Okay.
Thank you. The Kurdish president, Masoud Barzani, yesterday had an op-ed published in the Washington Post making the case for Kurdish independence. He said the referendum is binding, contrary to previous media reports. And he also said that it will not be a unilateral step by the Kurds. It will be a result of a negotiated settlement with Baghdad. So my question is, would the United States support it if the Iraqis do it in a negotiated settlement among themselves?
I think what we would continue to say about that is that the fight against ISIS is on, and that would be the top U.S. concern and probably the top Iraqi concern, I would imagine, at this time. We support our partnership with the government of Iraq. We continue to support that. We want to see the sole focus stay on ISIS. You've had far too many Iraqis who've had to leave their homes because of ISIS and the horrific things that they have done in that country. So we would like to see ISIS out, and then once Iraq is stabilized and people can go back to their homes, a referendum if Iraq decides to do that, if the Kurds decide to